All right, I'm going to share my screen and we will get going. So welcome everybody. As previously mentioned, my name is Nicole Byram and I'm a registered dietitian with Celiac Canada. And tonight we are chatting about back to school. So I have got closed captioning on. Does anybody in our audience, and if you could just pop it into the chat, let me know if you need closed captioning. Otherwise, I can turn it off because for our YouTube recordings, we can have it on YouTube. Does anybody need it for this evening? Okay, I'm going to turn it off. All right. So tonight we are chatting about back to school. It can be a stressful time for parents and for kids for back to school. So please know that we are going to leave lots of times for questions at the end of today's conversation. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, so please store up those questions, and then we're going to have a robust conversation at the end of it, so I can really answer all of those questions that you have about the return to school for your child or for your teen, because it can be a difficult time for everybody, especially for those newly diagnosed. Those who have been diagnosed for a while, it's a kind of old hat, and they can help others who are maybe newly diagnosed. But for those of you who are newly diagnosed, or those of you who have children who are newly diagnosed, then hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions tonight. And to any kids who are watching, feel free to ask questions. I am happy to chat with little people or the teens as well. So before we begin, I wanted to just make note that this presentation was created on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And here we promise to learn, live, and share educational experiences on this traditional territory, and we express our deep gratitude. So, and Celiac Canada has been empowering those with celiac disease since 1973, and our vision is to have every Canadian with celiac disease diagnosed and empowered. I have some poll questions for us. Let me see if I know how to do this. Okay, I'm going to launch the first poll. I'll give you a minute to answer that. Okay, most of you have answered. Most of you have youngers. I would say 44% is looking like it's a K to 3. 3 to 6, less 19%, and then 38%, a close second in grade 6 to 9. I'm curious as to, so where I am in Vancouver, we have, oh, there goes the singing of my dryer. We have K to 7 and then 8 to 12. We have elementary school and high school. Now I've split it up into these numbers, knowing that some of you will be coming from an area with middle school. So 94% responding, 47% of you are K to 3, 18% 3 to 6, and 6 to 9 is 35%. So the majority, almost half are the littles. Let's go on to the next question. Sorry, guys. There we go. My next question is, what do you need most help with the return to school for your children who have celiac disease? Are you worried about the hot lunch programs? Are you concerned about your child dining at friends' houses or having play dates after school? The school understanding your child's diagnosis. Are you concerned about your child feeling left out or being bullied, for that matter, at school? Food swapping in the classroom. Is this a concern for you? Let us know. Let me know. And I'll make sure to include that in the conversation tonight. And I'm actually going to get a pen and paper because I want to make sure that I hit on the heavy hitters. Okay, so play dates seems to be a hot topic. Ooh, the school understanding the diagnosis. Okay. This is going to be great. Child feeling left out. Okay, a little less bullying. That's good. That's good. Hot lunches a little less, but still significant, 35%. Food swapping, 29. Okay. Big one is school understanding diagnosis, dining out at friends' houses. Okay. And child feeling left out. All right, I'll give you another couple of minutes, or not couple of minutes, another few seconds here. 18 under 22 have responded. So we'll just let this sit for another minute, let those last few people respond, and then we will move on, knowing that, yeah, a good chunk of you are worried about, yeah, I can help you with all these things. That's the good news. The good news is I can help you with all this stuff. Okay, we are going to 19 out of 20 people. Good enough. All right, thanks everybody for that. Share those results with you. This was the end result. Okay, let's dive into it. So let's talk about celiac disease. So for those of you who are newly diagnosed, I just wanted to briefly go over to make sure everybody's on the same page as to what celiac disease is and why it's so important to follow the diet so strictly. So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease where the immune system reacts against the protein gluten. This is not a food allergy. It's a condition where the absorptive surface on the small intestine is damaged by gluten. So as you can see on the right side, the images here, we have an image of long finger-like projections, which is the normal intestinal villi. And on the right, we have the more blunted or atrophied villi, showing the mucosal damage on that surface of the intestine. What happens with normal villi in the intestine is you can see there's lots of lovely surface area there for nutrients to absorb, making us feel good, grow healthy, everything is functioning normally. On the right, when we have that atrophied villi, we no longer have that surface area or the absorptive capacity for our nutrients in our gut, leading to all sorts of short and long-term health complications. So thankfully, everybody here tonight, when we're in school age, my daughter, for example, was diagnosed when she was 5. She was very young, so we caught it early. And her gut, her TTG has been normalized. And so the assumption now, 8 years later, is that her gut is back to that normal healthy villi and she's absorbing all of her nutrients. She's growing well and her blood work is all coming back great. So it takes time to heal from the damaged villi, depending on the amount of villus atrophy that occurred or gut damage that it had occurred. But with our kids, lots of time and lots of opportunity for them to heal and for them to then have healthy, long lives ahead of us. So all very good news for those children who are diagnosed is that once we get onto that diet, they are going to heal beautifully. Where is gluten found? It's a protein found in brow ingredients, barley, rye, oats, and wheat. And if any of you need a little bit more information on the diet or any of the background of what celiac disease is, we do host a gluten-free 101 every month, myself and one of our volunteers, Linda Nielsen. Together, we do a presentation on everything and anything you need to know about celiac disease. So please go to our website, celiac.ca, to sign up for one of those. We host them monthly. Celiac disease is more than just a stomach ache. As many of you know, the stomach aches are one of the classic symptoms for celiac disease, but really that's just the tip of the iceberg. And those are primarily the people who we are diagnosing. It's all those under the iceberg that we're finding are being missed in the diagnostic process. So we see anemia, fatigue, low iron, reproductive issues, abdominal pain, as people age, osteoporosis. Often with kids, we see dental enamel defects. In everybody, we see neurological problems, including irritability, depression, anxiety, brain fog, dizziness. We see back pain, sinus pressures, hair loss. I've got here over 200 possible symptoms, but in actual fact, I was listening to a national and international, symposium, and they listed more than 320 symptoms. So what's interesting about celiac disease is no one symptom is specific to celiac disease. Therefore, it is often misdiagnosed or misunderstood, and people get diagnosed with something else. So it can be tricky to zone in on the diagnosis. 1% of Canadians have celiac disease. On average, it takes about 10 years to get diagnosed. So we have a long way to go here in Canada with diagnosing and getting those diagnoses up. 85% of Canadians with celiac disease remain undiagnosed, but that is not you here tonight. Tonight, we are talking about your kids who have been diagnosed. But just interesting information that if you are first degree relative, genetically related first degree relative of somebody with celiac disease, please go get yourself diagnosed. What we're finding is, in particular, children with a first degree relative who has diagnosed celiac disease, they are remaining asymptomatic. So they are not presenting with any symptoms, but they are developing celiac disease, or they do have celiac disease, despite the fact that they're not presenting with any symptoms. So the recommendation is that if you have a first degree family member who's genetically related to you, you are screened for celiac disease regardless of symptoms. So for those of you here tonight representing your child, I hope that both you and their other parent do get yourself screened, as well as any siblings that they have. And then as they get older, of course, any children they have of their own. So navigating celiac disease in the classroom. So I mentioned my daughter was 5 years old when she was diagnosed with celiac disease. Sorry, before we go on any further, for official questions, you are welcome to ask them at the end, or you can pop them into the Q&A box and I will be answering them. I can read them out and answer them from the Q&A at the end. And also everybody will be getting a copy of this webinar because it's being recorded and it will be sent to your inbox along with some helpful information following the webinar in the next couple of days. So no need to worry about taking notes. It's all going to be sent to you anyways. All right. So navigating celiac disease in the classroom. This gave me, as a dietitian, a moment of pause as my daughter was in kindergarten when she was diagnosed. And we were noticing she was having a lot of skin rashes and tummy aches. We were told, of course, that it was likely anxiety related to freshly starting kindergarten. However, I noticed when we were on vacation that her tummy aches continued and the skin rashes continued to get worse. My mom also has celiac disease, so I decided to screen my daughter, and ended up she had a high TTG and went on to have a positive biopsy. So my husband, many years later, was also diagnosed with celiac disease, and not many years, but a few years later. So we've got it on both sides of our gene pool in our family. So I have been through, my daughter's going into grade 8. I have been through K now to 8 in navigating celiac disease in the classroom. And one of the things that I have learned, and that all of the research tells us, is planning ahead is very important. So we talk about, and I will talk about again, ensuring that you are aware of the classroom calendar to know what events are coming up, especially for the littles. And about 50% of you tonight are K to 3. Nobody's over the age of nobody has any children over the age of grade 9 here tonight. So I'm going to speak primarily to that, but I will put in a few things for the older kids for the replay if anybody's watching this on YouTube. So in particular with our little ones, planning ahead, talking to the teacher. One of the concerns that people said is that they don't want their child to feel left out. So one way that we can do this is ensuring that our teacher has a stash of treats, or a treat stash, in their desk. So what I often do with my child, especially when she was littler, is we'd go to the store and I'd say to her, okay, pick out your favorites. So maybe we'd get some Skittles, or maybe we'd get some gummies of some kind, or maybe we'd get some, around Halloween time, some mini chocolate bars, the Caramilks or the Arrows, or the Reese's Pieces, something like that. That's a high reward treat for her, because when there's a celebration in the classroom, what I have found is it's most often not a gluten-free offering. So somebody will bring in cupcakes, somebody will bring in, little bags of treats, and you don't know as a parent, or your child doesn't know what sort of environment those were packaged in. Maybe the person was, there was crumbs on the counter. You never know what sort of area it was packaged in. So being aware that anything coming into the classroom that you're not sure of how it was prepared is unlikely to be safe for your child. So having a stash of treats in the teacher's desk is going to make sure that your child is also provided with a treat when the rest of the class is as well. So by taking your child to the store and allowing them to choose the treats, it's even more, because they're like, ooh, I know what I'm getting. This is super exciting. Everybody's getting those cupcakes, but I'm getting, a mini caramel milk bar, or I'm getting whatever it may be that they're excited about. So really putting their input into it makes that reward to be even more special. And making sure that you touch base with the teacher, because sometimes they'll actually use them in the classroom, like if there's a quiz, or if there's some kind of game that they're playing, they'll use those as well throughout the year. So remembering to touch base with your teacher, send an email, see them at pickup and say, how's the treat stash? Do I need to replenish it? Jubes are another thing. A bag of jubes if they're wanting to have like smaller things to give out. Anything like that to make sure that your child is not feeling left out is going to be really important. If the school provides snacks or treats, make sure you check the label to see that they're gluten-free. So occasionally my daughter's name is Julie, our middle daughter. They would say, I bought some jubes was the example I used, because one year one of the teachers bought jubes or gummy worms or lollipops. If you can ask the teacher to take a photo of the ingredients list, send it to you, and then you can have a read through. So remembering, we're looking for brow ingredients, those barley, rye, regular oats, and wheat. So you can see on the left-hand side contains wheat flour. So we know that would not be safe. And on the right, again, first ingredient is wheat flour. But remembering, when we're reading ingredients, we're looking for the brow ingredients in the ingredients list, or the contains statement, or if there's a may contain statement. Now, may contains is called a precautionary label, and it is not mandatory. It is a voluntary statement, but if it is there, then we know that the company has gone to their best efforts to ensure its safety, but they are not able to ensure that there's not any cross-contamination from a gluten-containing product if it does say may contains. So if there's a brow ingredient, if there's a brow in the contains, or if there's a brow in the may contains, that product is not safe for your child, and they will have to go to the treat stash instead. Educating classmates. So we will get to ensuring that the school understands the diagnosis, but understanding that the kids understand the diagnosis as well is important. When your child is younger, I really suggest buying stickers or labeling their backpack, their water bottle, and their lunch kit with a gluten-free sticker. So what I did is, out here in BC, we have Mabel's Labels, and we also have another company that I believe works with CCA called Oliver's Labels, and you can order labels from the company and just put them on the food, the backpack, the lunch kit, and the water bottle, to ensure that even if your child's too young to understand the diagnosis, or too young to be consistent with their understanding of their diagnosis, if there's a teacher or a TA or an older student in there watching the class through their lunch hour, they will be able to visibly see that there is an issue with wheat, barley, rye, and oats for your student, and they will be aware of that. So raising awareness as to the fact that your child has celiac disease is really important. So that's number one. Number two is educating other classmates. So what have we done? So throughout the years, things change. So educating other classmates when you're little looks like a sticker on their personal property, so that the older people understand that they can't be swapping food or changing food. As they get older and your child becomes much more aware of what celiac disease is, what it does to their body, how it makes them feel, they can tell their friends, and they can have a conversation with their friends that they can't have it. Sometimes kids like to say it's like an allergy, but it's not an allergy. So that, although we all know in the community that celiac disease isn't an allergy, it's an autoimmune disease, the greater community understands the term allergy. So for kids in particular, if it's easier for them to say it's like an allergy, then that might be easier for them to explain it to their friends. That's okay at this stage. We don't need to really tease apart the fine minutia of the narrative here. We just want the message to get across. The other thing you could do as a parent is go in at the beginning of the year and have a quick 5-minute chat with the class and just say, just so everybody knows, this is my daughter, Julie. Julie has celiac disease, which means she can't have some of the foods that you can have. And these are some common items that will make her feel sick. So just raising awareness, and parents will do this for all sorts of reasons in the classroom, and this is just one of many. We want everybody, all the kids, to understand that this isn't Julie's fault. This isn't anything she's done to cause it. But we need to protect her in order to keep her safe. And she's aware of what she can and can't have. So if there's any questions, ask Julie. She's the best advocate for her own health. So that's as they get a little bit older. We want to raise this awareness. We want to foster empathy among the classmates by empowering them with information. When kids don't know, they don't understand what's going on, often it can lead to a little bit of skepticism, and that's when you might get a little bit of bullying happening. If they understand that this is going to make their classmate or their friend sick, and it's not her fault, and it's just the way that her body was made, then it can foster a little bit more empathy through understanding and awareness. Finally, you could talk to the teacher and get the teacher to discuss it. So the teacher might say to the class, hey guys, let's take 5 minutes and learn a little bit about celiac disease. Here's what celiac disease is, boom, boom, boom. So really getting that early start and getting that class involved in the conversation, and then they can ask questions as well. Teach your child about advocacy. So encourage your child to politely decline treats if they're unsure about them, and to inform the teacher if they're offered something that contains gluten. So really empowering your child to speak up for their needs when they're young is going to set them up for success when they're older. So I mentioned that my mom has celiac disease as well. She's now in her 70s. She was, I guess she was in her 50s when she was diagnosed. It's very difficult when somebody offers you something to say no without a grand explanation about it. So we really want to teach our kids when they're young that they don't have to accept or take anything that they don't want. So teaching them that they can just politely say, no, thank you. If they're questioning or if they're uncertain about something, often kids with celiac disease will have a lot of food anxiety. My daughter in particular continues to have a very high level of food anxiety. Her response to any amount of glutening, no matter how tiny, is very severe. So she is really scared, understandably so, of getting cross-contaminated. So we want to be really aware of that with our kids, and teaching them to really advocate for themselves, stand up for themselves, and say, no, thank you. I've got my own stuff, or no, thanks. The teacher's got something for me in her desk or in his desk. So really empower them to speak up for themselves with confidence in order to keep them safe. Hot lunch programs are, I've volunteered for several years in the hot lunch program at my daughter's school, and they can be difficult. I didn't take it as far as actually organizing the hot lunch program. Some parents of children with celiac disease actually take it to the next level, and they will choose or source the locations where the hot lunch program comes from in order to ensure that they've secured a safe food source for their child. So you've got a couple of options here. You could do that. To contact the hot lunch providers to ask how they manage gluten-free menu items, finding out, first of all, what restaurants, what places are you sourcing the food from? Is it coming from Subway? Is it coming from, where's the pizza place? Where's the sushi place? Where's the macaroni, gluten-free macaroni coming from? Where are the smoothies coming from? All that sort of stuff. You want to connect with the PAC, or the Parent Advisory Council, who are most likely organizing the hot lunch program, early in the year to find out where the food is coming from. You can then contact the food companies to find out what they do and how they ensure safety for those who are gluten-free or who are requiring a gluten-free diet for whatever reason. In my experience, pizza days are the most common, but they're also the most risky. we've gone through the gamut of ordering it and experiencing good days and bad days. And then we've gone through the gamut of me bringing up pizza at lunch that is hot, or providing kind of cold pizza in the morning to take for lunch, or agreeing that after school on a hot lunch day, we're going to go get you something special, because kids can, again, that circling back to that, you're worried about your child feeling left out. I want to really be aware of solutions to that. So on a hot lunch day, as they're sitting there watching all their friends eating pizza and they're sitting there with their gluten-free egg salad sandwich, if they know after school we're going for ice cream, or after school we're going to the library, or after school I get to have an extra long play date, if they know that there's something for just them happening, then that helps to ease that pain and helps to make them feel a little bit better. So talk to your child, have that conversation with them, especially as they get a little bit older. When they're little, it is harder to understand. So in that way, we have kind of a more simpler conversation. We just can tell them, but guess what? We're going for ice cream after school. As they're older, you can say to them, what do you want to do? This is our problem. What's going to be our solution? And how are we going to make you feel included and special as well? So talk to your kids. When they're in high school, you can give them money. They could walk somewhere and get it. They could get something from their cafeteria. If their cafeteria has gluten-free versions, gluten-free friendly foods available. Not all of them do. But in high schools, kids can often walk somewhere and get something. So that's another option for the older children as well. For all parents, I've had parents call me in tears saying that their child had a gluten exposure and they're so concerned they're back to square one. Rest assured, a single gluten exposure is not related with the increased likelihood of long-term complications. What happens with a single exposure from gluten is your child might feel crummy. It's going to take them time, and we're going to have to just give them care, time to rest, fluids, maybe heat. Heat on the tummy can feel good. Lying down can feel good. What we need to do is just ride the wave until they're feeling better. But rest assured that villus atrophy that we talked about on the first slide, that doesn't happen with a single exposure. That happens with repeated gluten exposures over time. It's why the gluten challenge takes 8 to 12 weeks to do, because a single exposure is not linked with villus atrophy. Okay, if they feel sick at school, if they think they've had a cross-contamination at school, let's talk to your child, or your grandchild, or whoever the student is in your life, about what their plan is. So tell them who they should speak to. What safe person do they feel comfortable going to see in the school? Maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a TA, maybe they want to go to the office and speak to somebody in the office. Teach your child that if they're not feeling well, to reach out, and then have a plan with the school. So maybe they call home, depending on your child's severity of reaction. So with my child, she will need to come home. There's not a lot of riding through that wave in the classroom. She needs to come home. So have a plan. If you're at work, have a plan for where they can go. Maybe it's a grandparent's house, maybe it's a friend's house, maybe it's an aunt or uncle's house, but have somewhere that they can go. Have a plan for that. And if your child doesn't need to come home, then instruct the school that the plan is water and rest. So maybe it's sitting in I know we call it the nurse's room, but really there's not nurses on staff too much at schools anymore. But they can sit in an area where they can rest and have water until they're feeling like they can get up and go back to the classroom. And that might not be for a while. So set the expectation that you don't know what the response is going to be like in your child, and they will need as much time as they need. So just having that communication. So on that, one of your other primary concerns were how to teach the school to understand what celiac disease is. And I'm actually going to leave my presentation at the end of this and walk you through where you can find some resources on our website, because we've got a teacher letter and a school letter and a teacher brochure, which I highly encourage you to print out, give to your teacher, and then the letter, you sign your child's name, and it can just go into the permanent file for the school for the duration of their time at that school. So I'll show you where those are. And then the teacher brochure is a handy explanation about what celiac disease is, and your teacher can keep it in the desk and read it as well. So they really do have a good understanding of what celiac disease is, how it affects any student that they have coming into their classroom, and how they can best help them. I spoke a little bit about advocacy earlier. So how do we build a strong child? We all want our kid to be resilient and strong and empowered. So how do we do that? We start with education and understanding. We teach them what gluten is. We teach them how it affects their body and why a gluten-free diet is essential. We want to have open communication. I encourage discussion around the kitchen table, around the water cooler at your work. Increase communication about this disease because it's so underdiagnosed and so often misunderstood. We really want to increase the communication in our greater community about this. But in particular, we want to make your child feel comfortable with discussing any challenges that they have or that they'll face with having celiac disease. So really talking about it, making it normal to talk about an upset tummy or diarrhea or gas or bloating or brain fog. There's, all of these symptoms are what they may or may not be experiencing. So let's open up the door to talk about it without any discomfort. I often say to people, I'm a dietitian, I talk about GI issues all day long. So talking about poop is not a problem for me, but for some people it might be. So let's break that down so your child doesn't feel like a little bit nervous and uncomfortable with the conversation. Let's normalize it. Let's talk about it. Let's advocate together. Teach your child how to advocate for themselves and their dietary needs. Role play different scenarios. So sit down with your child and say, okay, somebody's offering you something for their lunch and they tell you it's gluten-free. Well, I can tell you right now that your child might feel nervous about that. I know my daughter would. She'd be like, ooh, I don't know if that's gluten-free or not. So if I put that in my mouth, I might be vomiting in a few hours. And I know I don't want that because I have dance rehearsal later. So how do I, in a way that I feel good, say no to that? So role play that and let them get comfortable with that conversation. So Charlie says, here, have some popcorn. I know it's gluten-free. My mom made it this morning. You don't know if the butter that was put on that was also used for toast, and therefore there could be breadcrumbs on that butter and it's been poured onto the popcorn. One crumb can make your child sick. So your child says, you know what? Maybe they just say, I'm really full, or I love my lunch, I'm good, or I don't really feel like popcorn right now. Rather than saying, I have celiac disease, I don't know if it's safe, because a child might then respond with, oh, but I know it is. They can have other explanations as to why they're not going to take that. So role playing can be really helpful in order to best communicate with teachers, friends, and other adults moving forward. That includes play dates, which we will talk about a little bit too. I've got that on my list to make sure we cover. Involve your child in food choices. Take them grocery shopping. Teach them how to label read, which is down further here, at obviously an age-appropriate level. Getting them used to looking at labels and feeling comfortable with looking at labels is really important. Getting them involved when they're younger in food choices so they know apples, oranges, bananas, grapes. These things are all gluten-free. So if they're at somebody's house and they say, would you like a banana? Or I've cut up some cucumbers and carrots and peppers. Would you like some? They can say, yes, please, knowing that those are naturally gluten-free foods that there's very low risk of cross-contamination with. So they can comfortably say that. Whereas if they're offered a piece of gluten-free toast for breakfast after a sleepover, it might have been toasted in the same toaster. So let your child know that the reason we have your own toaster here in the house is because we know that there can be cross-contamination in regular toasters. So that's why you have your own toaster. So really get them into that conversation. Cooking skills. Encourage your child to learn the basic cooking. Kids who cook eat better. So wearing a slightly different hat for this little section as a dietitian, Picky eating is really common in our general pediatric population, but it's also very common in our celiac population, partially because our children have learned that food can make them feel sick. This can cause them to have a more narrowed repertoire of allowable foods. So we want to really expand those. So teaching them how to cook, getting them involved, taking them shopping and helping them to cook. We know from research that kids who choose their food, kids who take time to cook it, are more likely to eat it. Teaching label reading, we talked about, and positive reinforcement. So celebrate those successes. Positive reinforcement boosts your child's confidence and motivates them to continue making healthy choices. So really, celebrating those moments of they come home and they say, Mom, the role playing we did was a success, and I talked to my teacher and I got something from my treat stash, even though my friend brought in, baby girl, I'm just talking. Even though my friend brought in treats, I did what we talked about. So celebrate that. That's amazing. Well done. High five. Tell me about it. Talk me through it. What did you do? So really getting kind of that feedback and involvement. Lead by example. If you or your other family members also follow a gluten-free diet, model healthy behaviors and attitudes towards food. Emphasize the gluten-free lifestyle can be enjoyable and fulfilling. So don't be like, this isn't good. I mean, sometimes, honestly, together you can be like, whoa, that wasn't good, and then it can be a little bit funny. But really leading by example, and being that role model that your child is looking up to. Focus on strengths. Building a strong sense of self-worth will help them to face challenges and resiliency, and celebrate differences. Emphasize that everybody is unique and different, and that having celiac disease is just one aspect of who they are. Having celiac disease does not define you. And if any kids are out there listening, I'm going to say that again. Celiac disease does not define you. You define you. Who you are, the sparkle in your eye and your soul, that's who you are. You're not celiac disease. Just like other kids, lots of kids bring something to school with them, whether it be a peanut allergy, whether it be a learning difficulty. You're not alone. These challenges that we all bring into our daily lives are unique to ourselves, but everybody is joined together in the fact that we all have our own issues that we bring to work, to the table, to school, wherever it may be. Okay, so resources. So here we're going to look at the teacher brochure and the school letter. And this is where I'm going to step away from my presentation for a second, because I want to actually take you to these places, because I want you to see where they are. So first of all, we do have a Facebook group. I think it's over 20,000 people now. If you are not part of this Facebook group, I highly suggest you join it. It's a great interactive group where you can ask other parents, other grandparents, other caregivers questions about celiac disease, and you will get a lot of response. Trust me, this is a great place to go. Then the teacher brochure and the school letter. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a quick sec while I pull that up. And then we are going to, then I'm going to show you where that is. Bear with me. Okay. Share screen again. Okay, so here we are at the Celiac Canada's website. So what do? How do you get there? One of the easiest ways is to just type in children in the search bar, and it'll take you here. And you go to children. And here we have our resources for parents and children. And under additional resources, you will see a teacher brochure and a teacher letter. Here you can click here. This is a teacher brochure. And here it talks about what is celiac disease, what are the symptoms, what are the treatments, getting the diagnosis in the classroom. So this is an excellent brochure. Okay, the next one we have is the teacher letter. And this is the one that I suggest people download and they share with the office. Okay, so dear teachers, educational assistants, etc. Julie has a serious medical condition, which the only treatment is a strict gluten-free diet for life. So you fill out your student's name, This is an explanation, and then name, home phone, cell phone, and work phone. So on this, when your child comes to the office and says, I think I'm having a gluten attack or a gluten reaction, can you please call home? The other thing you could do is on the back of this page, have your plan for what to do if your child is sick. Okay, so your plan might be call mom or dad or grandparents. If they are feeling well enough to stay at school, they can rest with water. If they're not, then this is the plan for coming home. So great, great option for those two things right there. Okay, I'm going to pop back into my my thing, but I'm pretty much done. I'm just going to go here, share screen again. Okay, Facebook group, and then questions. So let's open this up to questions. Oh, the only thing I didn't talk about, and I'm just going to do that quickly, is the play dates. So for play dates, what you can also do is print up that brochure and give it to some of your kids' besties. And then the family understands. Or what you can do is things like a Costco gluten-free pizza. You know, you can offer to buy it. They can buy it themselves. They know that that's, and if they can keep it in their freezer. So if your child is over for dinner, they can line one of their cookie trays with fresh tinfoil or fresh parchment paper, and then cook it on the top shelf of their oven. So they know that there's no, if they're cooking it with a gluten pizza, remembering gluten's always underneath, gluten-free is always on top. No convection oven is to go on, so nothing's being blown around. And then they'll be absolutely fine. Other things you can say to them, like, cut up cheese, veggies, fruit, all that is fine for snacks. You can, if you know your child is going for a play date, you can send them with a snack for after school. For those older kids, if they're going for a play date, they'll know what foods they can have. You know, the teenagers, they can have some Doritos, they can have, you know, the veggies, or they'll know what rice crackers they can have. The older kids are, especially if they've had celiac disease for a longer period of time, they're really well versed in talking about it. So, and I wanted to mention that tonight's webinar was brought to us by Odo's Gluten Free. And so Odo's is at odos.com, ODOUGHS.com. And it is an amazing sponsor. Odo's Gluten Free Bakery is sponsoring tonight's webinar. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to get to the questions that are written down. So how often should I get a sibling tested? Sarah has asked. Siblings should be tested every 2 to 3 years, or if a new symptom presents. So if you are finding that first test is negative, they're trucking along, no issues, you can do it. What I usually say is if there's blood work getting done, just get a TTG test thrown in there. If you are going to get a test done, then every 2 to 3 years, or if there's any new symptoms that are presenting. I'm just going to take a quick sip. Okay. Karen asks, my daughter is going to middle school and she will be in a cooking class. Thank you, Karen, for bringing this up. This is a great question. Is she okay to measure and participate in cooking, but not eat the food? I don't see it possible. Upstairs.
Can I go for upstairs?
Yes. Sorry. Do you feel okay, so this is a really good question and a really important speaking point. So cooking in the classroom is an issue. Airborne flour. So for anybody who has celiac disease, you can't absorb gluten through your skin. So if you have flour on your hands, that's okay. The risk is, of course, that you're going to touch your mouth, and that's how this flour is going to the gluten's going to get into your system. However, flour can access our throat through our nose as well. So flour can go airborne, you breathe it in, it coats the back of your throat, you swallow it, and you get sick. So your child really shouldn't be in a classroom with any loose flour that's being used. So my daughter last year had a cooking component in her grade 7 classroom, and they actually ended up changing the entire cooking component to be something that was did not use loose flour because it was too high risk for Julie to have. So we can do a couple of things here. Your child can wear, depending on how old they are and how comfortable they are, they could wear a mask. They could be near a window to keep the ventilation going and be as far away from it as possible. If that is not possible, they can get a pass from having to participate in that due to medical reasons. But really, it is a very tricky situation, and kids should not ever be around, or parents who have celiac disease should never be around loose flour. Everybody knows those yellow bags of flour, when you roll them over and they poof up, you're breathing that in and you're coating your intestines. I've seen lots and lots of clients who have come in and their TTG is super sticky. They don't understand why it's not coming down. And when I say to them, do you bake for your family? Quite often the answer will be yes. They'll say, but I'm not eating it and I'm washing my hands thoroughly. Well, that TTG is still riding really high because they're inhaling it. So please do be very cautious and careful about that. Do you feel an explanation of celiac disease would single out the child? You know what, Nicole, this is a really great question. And this is where the conversation piece comes in with your child. Do they mind being singled out? Some kids are proud of the fact, like my daughter really owns it. And she doesn't mind being singled out, but she's very extroverted. For kids who don't want to be singled out, that might be the case. So have that conversation with your child and say, how do you want us to handle this? How do you feel most comfortable? Take their lead. I don't know how old your child is, but really take their lead in their comfort level. And keeping in mind that the goal of this entire thing is to keep them safe and healthy. So how are we going to achieve the goal of safe and healthy, while also communicating to the classroom and the school that this is in fact what's going on, and this is how we need the classroom to be handled for our students. So that's where that conversation comes in. So if I can help you or support you better with that, please let me know. Candace says, we are very new to this. Daughter is heading into grade 8 and has cooking class in school this year. Does anyone have any suggestions or experiencing for navigating this class? So yeah, so similar to what I was saying earlier. So heading into grade 8, and with masks being so kind of normalized through 2020 and beyond, your child might feel comfortable with that. As Nicole pointed out, she also might feel singled out. So again, conversation with your child, but keeping in mind that inhaling gluten is a problem. It can cause a cross-contamination, and we do need to be aware of it. What I would do is I would talk to your child's teacher at the very beginning of the year and say, this is what we need. How can you accommodate this to ensure that Candace is safe? Candace will not, sorry, your name is Candace. Your child will not be the first child with celiac disease that they've had come across their classroom in cooking class. Ask them how they are planning on accommodating your child and what they are going to do to ensure her safety. And if their plan of action is not up to snuff, then you can come in with some other suggestions. Kieran, siblings should test every 2 to 3 years. What about parents? Same thing. How can someone who tests negative then test positive a few years later? Great question. So Kieran, same thing for parents, every 2 to 3 years, or if symptoms suddenly come up. This is autoimmune diseases. They can be triggered. So remember, genetically predisposed autoimmune diseases can be triggered by various things. We are not sure of the entire list of things that will trigger celiac disease to turn on those genes. So there's HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 are the two genes for people who have celiac disease. Most people, we know that people with type 1 diabetes are increased risk. So we often test those with type 1 diabetes. We know that following a pregnancy, you can be, celiac disease can develop. Following a traumatic or stressful event, people with celiac disease can develop. So we know that there's certain life experiences, and we know that there's certain times in our lives, like ages, that you're more at risk for developing celiac disease. But it is just that, it's a genetic gene that is triggered on by an event. And it can happen at any time. The oldest person ever diagnosed with celiac disease was 101 years old. She was in Italy. And, babies can be diagnosed. So it can happen at any point in time in your life. Crystal says, seeking clarification on when wheat is listed in the ingredients, confirming that gluten-free claim would trump the wheat ingredient. Yes, Crystal, you are right. Anytime you see a gluten-free claim on a product, it is a green light. You are good to go to have that product. Occasionally, you will see a very confusing label where it says gluten-free, yet may contain wheat. The may contain wheat there is for people with a wheat allergy. For those with celiac disease, there's a tiny, tiny bit of wiggle room where we can have up to 20 parts per million of gluten per serving. And what that means is, if you think about the amount, you're not seeing, there we go. The amount of wheat or flour in the kind of the black tip of that pencil, that's how much gluten your gut can handle in a day. So we know that 10 milligrams of gluten or above will cause damage to the villi. Anything below that won't. So that's where that 20 parts per million conversation comes in. If you want to learn more about that, I've got a video on our website, our YouTube channel, excuse me, and it's called the 20 parts per million and 10 milligram threshold, I believe is what it was called. It's on our YouTube channel along with lots and lots of other resources. But that in particular talks about that threshold of that tiny, tiny little bit of wiggle room that a person with celiac disease has versus somebody with a wheat allergy who can tolerate none. So that may contain is there for somebody with a wheat allergy, but the gluten-free symbol means that Health Canada, it is Health Canada and CFIA approved, and it is safe for somebody with celiac disease. So anytime you see that gluten-free label, you are good to go and it is safe for you. Play-Doh, great point. Regular Play-Doh is okay in kindergarten. At 5, they need gluten-free Play-Doh. Yes. So regular Play-Doh is a risk for kids with celiac disease, especially for our littles, because if they're playing with it, they don't always remember to wash their hands thoroughly, and they might eat something and get some flour in their mouth and then ingest it. Of course, then it gets to their digestive system and they can have a reaction. So we want to be very, very safe with that. My daughter's kindergarten teacher actually ordered in some gluten-free Play-Doh for her. You can make it yourself and bring it into the classroom. There's lots of different options for that, but yes, Play-Doh is a risk. At daycare, can they eat veggies and fruit from the shared facility? So yes, again, that's that big conversation. That's that printing up those brochures, handing it to the daycare and saying, these are the risks that my child needs to avoid. So please, if you're cutting up fruits and vegetables, do so with a clean knife, clean cutting board. Make sure that you weren't just slicing bread or making sandwiches on that cutting board and then doing the veggies. Again, empowering them with information so that you feel comfortable sending your child there to ensure that they are safe. The other thing that we know is, remember, we are monitoring your child's symptoms and we need to monitor their TTG levels. So when they're first diagnosed, we're going to get that TTG level tested. Then we're going to test it again at 6 months. Then we're going to test it again at a year. And then we're going to test it annually thereafter. We want to see that trend of the TTG line come down. We don't expect it to normalize at the first test, but we do expect to see the trend line diminishing. If that TTG is staying firm like this, or if it's going up, we know that there's cross-contamination coming from somewhere. So the TTG, although it's not in direct correlation with villus atrophy, it does give us a very good understanding of if there's cross-contamination somehow being sprinkled in the diet, and then we can kind of become detectives and figure out where that's coming from. Tanya asks, are masks sufficient enough to wear when in food class due to the airborne particles? Yeah, so Tanya, this is a great question. Unfortunately, we're making some assumptions based on this. There's no studies to my knowledge that have tested to see if the gluten particle can make it through a mask. Because it is a barrier, that by assumption, I will assume that I mean, if the gluten is not going to get through the mask itself. The gluten particle is too large. It's not like a virus particle that's going to be tiny. But there are sides, and if it's an ill-fitting mask, there could be areas. So remembering, we're working on a 10 milligram threshold here for the day. So it is definitely going to reduce the risk. Is it going to eliminate the risk? I can't answer that fully, but everything that we talk about is around risk reduction, risk mitigation. You want to reduce the risk for your child in every turn you can. Unfortunately, in this world, risk comes in all shapes and sizes, including risk with gluten. That includes dining out. When you're talking to the kitchen and you're saying, you know, this is what I'm hoping the kitchen will do for me to ensure I'm safe for this meal, but you never know what is happening behind in the dining room of the kitchen. There's a slight chance of risk there. So everything is coming with a rind of uncertainty that we're trying to work with. But yes, the mask will reduce it, but I don't think it will eliminate it entirely. Shandaya asks, are either the HLA genes? Yes, they are. Type 1 diabetes and celiac disease share the DQ8 gene, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I'm sure it's the DQ8 gene that they share. But yes, every child with type 1 diabetes should be screened for celiac disease. It is part of the protocol, especially for the first 5 years. So it shows that in children, for the first 5 years of that type 1 diabetic diagnosis, they're at increased risk for developing celiac disease, and it decreases over time, but definitely in that first 5 years should be screened for it regularly. And then thereafter, if any symptoms persist. And quite often, one of the symptoms for celiac disease presenting in kids with type 1 diabetes is actually a low blood sugar. I did a webinar, Celiac Canada did a webinar with Diabetes Canada, and it is on our YouTube channel as well. So you can go back and watch that, and it gives you a lot more information on that. If there's no gluten-free label, but it does not contain any gluten ingredients, is it safe to eat, or do we need to worry about cross-contamination? Great question again, Shandaya, and I would really encourage you to come to our next Gluten-Free 101 to learn a lot more about that. It's not a simple answer, but yes, anytime you see a gluten-free label, it is safe. As long as there's no brown ingredients, so barley, rye, regular oats, and wheat in the ingredients list, in a contain statement or a may contain statement, most often the food is safe. There are some exceptions though. Lentils are an exception. Hemp seeds are an exception. Flax seeds are an exception. All pasta, cookies, cakes, crackers, they all need to be labeled gluten-free because of the high risk of cross-contamination. So in order to really best answer that question, I'll send you to our website, to celiac.ca, and I'll get you to print up our labeling guide. So again, if you go into that search bar at the very top and put in labeling guide, you can print up our labeling guide. It will explain everything. And then I also encourage you to go to our upcoming events and sign up for that for the next Gluten-Free 101. Oh, great. Sarah says she uses Crayola Model Magic as a Play-Doh substitute. Awesome. Thank you for that tip, Sarah. That's great. Heather says, my kids eat lunch at their desks, shared tables that they also work at. Obviously, lots of crumbs. I don't know if the tables are wiped down. Should I insist the teachers clean the desks right after, or is that being too cautious? You know what, Heather, I don't believe in being too cautious. Don't ever feel you need to be polite in order to, in a case that it might increase risk for your child. What you could do is get your child a placemat for their classroom. So depending if they're in a younger grade, they might want to bring, you know, one of their favorite placemats. Maybe if it's, you know, they want to bring like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some of the younger TV shows. Paw Patrol, that's a popular one, a Paw Patrol placemat. And so they can put it right on their desk and they can eat on that. And that can always be clean for them. It's a clean surface. As they get older, they're not going to want to do that. That's not going to be cool at all. But then they'll be eating more at individual desks. They can be in charge of making sure that there's nothing on their desk where they're eating. But usually those younger grades, they might have a more shared space. They might want to try something like that. Or you can just say to the teacher, can you please make sure that their area has been wiped down with a wet paper towel to ensure safety, not overreacting at all. Kieran, my daughter and husband were diagnosed 3 years ago. My husband's TTG went from 80 and is now normalized. My daughter's TTG was over 250 and still sitting at 30, declining, but still not normalized 3 years later. Do you see these kinds of cases? Yes, we do. Yes, we absolutely do. So options for this are to request a follow-up gastro, like an endoscopy. If you're concerned, if she's still symptomatic, you might want to do a follow-up endoscopy to see what the villus atrophy is looking like. If it's completely healed, then we're not going to worry about that TTG of 30. If it hasn't completely healed, then we want to figure out where that cross-contamination might be coming from. If your child is feeling totally normal. They're not symptomatic. There's no atypical symptoms presenting. Their iron is normal. There's no dental enamel defects. Their growth is normal. Their weight is normal. This might just be something we don't need to be too concerned about. A bit of a deeper dive conversation might be needed on this. So I encourage you to call our phone lines. Again, you can find that on our website to talk to one of our volunteers in a little bit more depth about what we can do to ensure that 30 is okay for your daughter. But what I would encourage you to do is go to our symptom checker again on our website, find out if any of those symptoms might be lining up with cross-contamination, and talk to your doctor about the option of a follow-up endoscopy. Heather says the parents in one of my daughter's classes are excellent and often send special treats for my daughter so that she is included. Hence, she's declared that she loves having celiac disease because her classmates make her feel so special. That is lovely to read. That being said, they will often go to bakeries and buy $10 gluten-free cupcakes. Yes, from non-gluten-free bakeries. Is this safe for my daughter to eat? Another incident, family took the initiative to make my daughter special gluten-free bread for a classroom celebration, but I have no idea what precautions were taken. Should I ask them to bring it? Yeah. Yes, Heather, you are singing the tune of so many of us parents. I've got so many examples of the best intentions making somebody sick. My mom has been sick from people saying, it's on gluten-free bread. I made you a gluten-free sandwich. And then she's get sick. Or I made your daughter Annie's in their own pot, but that the spoon was used to stir both pots and you wouldn't know that. And somebody gets sick. No, if there's gluten-free items cooked or baked, in the same bakery as regular bakery items, our overarching recommendation is no, those are not safe. Occasionally, bakeries will they'll outsource gluten-free products, in which case they are safe. They're usually wrapped individually. On the rare occasion, if you know the bakery owner and they're like, no, I make the gluten-free bakery items first thing in the morning before any loose flour is opened up, when everything is sparkling and clean, then your risk is tongs. Have they used tongs to pick up a regular muffin and then they're using it to pick up yours, in which case then there's a risk of cross-contamination. Again, going back to that risk assessment, that conversation about how do we mitigate risk on a daily basis. And the cost, the burden of that additional cost. That's why I always fall back to that treat stash. Your child's chosen them, you know they're safe. I lean on that. I discourage families from bringing in food for my daughter. And I say, you know what, thank you so much. I really appreciate you trying to be inclusive. But she's got her own treat stash in the teacher's desk. So not to worry about it. Save yourself the $10 on a gluten-free muffin. That's usually the conversation that I have. And it's been very successful. Crystal asks, this may be a CRA question, but asking in case you're aware, can we claim additional kitchen items, appliances under the medical expenses tax? I know the woman that you need to talk about. In January, we always host Tax 101. There is a Tax 101 on our YouTube channel. You also need to email Linda Nielsen at ccatax at celiac.ca, I believe is her email. So many of you probably know you can claim the incremental difference between two items. So if a regular loaf of bread is $3.99 and a gluten-free loaf of bread is $9.99, the difference between the two you can claim on your taxes for the individual in your family who is using it. We have 5 people in our family. 2 of us have celiac disease. We all eat gluten-free across the board because I want to ensure safety for the 2 that are, because they are so symptomatic and I want to keep their villi healthy and strong. So we buy all gluten-free bread. We buy all gluten-free pasta. We buy all gluten-free crackers, cereals, you name it, with a few exceptions. So when we have that, say $5 difference in food, we take that, divide it by $5 divided by 5 times by 2. So you cannot claim the entire difference if only 2 of you are officially diagnosed. It is a challenge, it is a barrier, and it is time consuming. CCA is trying to work on better solutions to the tax problem. So stay tuned on that. Appliances, I don't believe you can claim, but do ask Linda Nielsen. So look on our website, celiac.ca. For that, I believe it is CCA Tax QA at celiac.ca. Let me double check that, guys. Hold on 2 seconds. I want to make sure I give you that right contact. CCA Tax QA at celiac.ca. So that was right. So that is the CCA Tax QA at celiac.ca. I'm putting it into the chat so everybody's got it there. Okay, I'm just going to go into the Q&A to see if there's any questions in there, because I think there are. Janet, are you aware of any schools or school boards that have policies that discourage all parents from sending treats into the classroom so that children with celiac disease? Are you aware of any schools or school boards that have policies that discourage all parents from sending treats into the classroom so that children with celiac disease and their parents don't need to worry about outside treats? I'm not aware of that. I was aware of that policy during COVID, but I'm not aware of it anymore. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that, Janet. All the schools here that I'm aware of in our catchment anyways, and in North Van, kids are allowed to bring in treats. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Julie asks, do you label the child stickers gluten-free or something about celiac disease? The ones that we have they say gluten-free on them. So that's how that's what we do. I believe there are other ones out there, but the other thing you could just do is get a label maker and do it like that, or take a Sharpie and write it on. Do you recommend separate cutting boards for friends' houses? If it's an old wooden cutting board, no, I would never expect a friend to have a fresh cutting board. But what you could do if you're concerned is ask them to put a piece of parchment paper down and cut it on that to ensure it's a clean surface. That is a cheap, easy fix. What has been your experiencing with asking to keep gluten-free cupcakes in the school freezer for impromptu birthday parties? I haven't asked about that. The school freezer is generally a pack kitchen, from my understanding. So it would require somebody to leave the classroom, go down and get it, which might be a barrier. Again, all schools are different. It would be a barrier in my child's school, but go ahead. Great question to ask. Open up that conversation. I'm aware of the time, guys. If people have to drop off, please do. I'm going to finish answering these questions just because I want to make sure that everybody's question is answered, but I understand if you have to leave. So thanks for joining us here tonight. You will be getting email follow-up with all of this in your email. So watch for that in the next few days. Heather says, I have had 3 daughters diagnosed with celiac disease in the past few months. Wow, Heather. I have 3 daughters as well. Only one so far is diagnosed. My youngest will be in kindergarten next year. What should I tell the teacher about Play-Doh in the classroom? Also, how thoroughly should desks, tables be washed after lunch? I don't know if they wash them down. Okay, so Heather, we did briefly talk about those questions. Play-Doh, yeah, Play-Doh is not safe. Your child shouldn't be playing with it just because in the kindy rooms at the age of kindies, they're not aware enough to know that they have to thoroughly wash their hands to keep themselves safe. So my recommendation is to provide another source and let the teacher know that your child's not allowed to play with it. But in order for them to meet that, so they don't feel left out, make sure there's an alternative for them to use. And again, with that washing down, so thinking about bringing in a table mat for your child to eat on, or yes, ensuring that they are washed down thoroughly. Just a paper towel. Again, we're visibly looking for things, right? We're visibly wanting to make sure that it's cleaned off. Heather also asks, the parents of my oldest daughter's class are great. They will make special trips to buy my daughter gluten-free cupcakes for the birthday party. So I think, Heather, I think you posted this in the chat as well. So I think I've answered that already. All right, everybody, I'm going to close the Q&A. I just see here, Stephanie says, I'm a teacher and my school has a policy like that, but I feel it's school-based. I'm in Nova Scotia. I would recommend chatting with the school principal about this. Thank you, Stephanie, for that feedback. That is wonderful. Nicole says, thank you so much for your energy and time. Thank you so much, Nicole, for pointing that out. Celiac is my passion, as it is with anytime our children are involved, it becomes our passion. It's just a lucky thing I'm a dietitian. So I get to use my voice. I encourage you all to empower your kids, teach them to stand up for yourselves. We need to raise this next generation to really get away from that needing to be politeness or needing to be polite over anything else. We need to advocate for ourselves and stand up for ourselves and make sure that we are not, that we are empowered with knowledge and that we know how to handle our diet as we navigate this journey with celiac disease, with incredible caregivers such as yourselves helping them along the way. I didn't touch too much on the older kids. Does anybody in those older age categories have any questions? The cafeteria can be challenging for those, for all of you out there. Most McDonald's, the fries, the ice cream, the smoothies are gluten-free. So, I hate to say it, but we all rely on a little drive-through here and there. So knowing that those are there, with Halloween coming up, connect with us, keep in connection with us about how to handle Halloween for our little ones. We always have a big candy trade at the end of the night. Out go the Wonder Bars, out go the Marses and the Twixes and the Kit Kats, and in come the Caramels and the Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and the Aero bars and the Snickers and all those kind of things. So stay tuned for a little bit more information on that. I will be, our Facebook group will be chatting about it, and we usually do have a candy list that we hand out. So that will be helpful. And everybody, mistakes happen, expect them. There is going to be a cross-contamination. There is going to be a glutening. It is not going to cause your child to have permanent damage. It is a one and done thing. It will make them feel unwell, most likely, and you will get through it, and your child will get through it. It takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes caring and extra hugs and love. So expect it, that it will happen. It is maybe sometimes it's human error. We're all humans, so that happens. So I wish you all the best. I am here for you in this journey. If you have questions along the way, please reach out to us at celiac.ca. If you have questions specifically for me, please reach out to me at nicole.byram@celiac.ca. I'm happy to help you and answer any questions. My time is up, and I thank you all for joining us here tonight. I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. All for now. Thanks, everybody. Good night.